the shoulder guy towards taking a look.
Yeah. Okay. Call to order the City Council work session for Monday, August 26, 2024. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Lisa.
Tim Patrick.
Here.
Bonnie Shimalunas. Here. Scott Steckles.
Here.
Michael Husky.
Here.
Darla LaQuinn. Here. Mark Baker.
Here.
Shannon Derby. Here. Bill LeClaire.
Good.
And Doug Burke.
Here. Okay, there's no different four, but we do have a consideration of any council member requests to participate in this meeting from a remote location. As we know, Bill is on the phone, so looking for a motion to allow Bill to join us. So moved. Thank you, Tim. I'm sorry, thank you, Adam. Second by Bonnie. Any discussion? This will be a roll call. Lisa.
Shannon Derby. Aye. Bill LeClaire. Doug Brandt.
Aye.
Tim Patrick.
Aye.
Bonnie Shimalunas. Aye. Scott Steckles.
Aye.
Adam Husky.
Aye.
Darla LeClaire. Aye. Mark Baker.
Aye. Thank you. Welcome, Bill, officially. On to number 4, discussion items. Under A, we have discussion of proposed rate changes for emergency medical services. The recommended action is none. There's a discussion only prior to consideration at a regular city council meeting.
Yes, Assistant Chief Megas.
I wanted to ask a question if I could.
Sure.
Normally, aren't we recorded or on TV for these work sessions? Didn't that policy happen previously?
We're on.
We're live now?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see you.
Yeah, we're live. Yep.
So they can hear us as we speak?
Yes.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, you should speak up a little bit because we're using a room mic.
So it's up above, okay.
Yep. It probably works better than the ones that are in front of you at regular meetings, but yeah, please do speak up. Yep. I'd heard both from the Assistant Chief, who's in charge of the EMS services of the department, and Chief Murak of an interest in addressing certain of our charges for EMS. Thought it would be good to introduce it tonight, see what sort of questions there might be, and with the intent of bringing it at the next regular meeting for council action. So, Ryan, if you have any introductory comments or background?
Yeah, as you can see, we have a little packet passed around. You can look at 2 pages. The first one is proposed for next year, 2025. Last one, or next page is for 2022. As you can see, we haven't had a rate change in roughly 3 years. Our billing company we use recommended an increase. For the most part, we didn't address the increase except for our critical care, our specialty care transports. Those we were pretty far behind compared to our comparables in the area. So we did, that's probably the biggest jump you'll see on this page, along with our on-scene care for BLS did jump up a little bit more, just to be more comparable with their comparables.
What's a BLS?
So BLS would be a basic life support. So like, let's say you call 911 and it doesn't require paramedic level skills, but you still want to go to the hospital, that requires, and we just build it out at the BLS level.
You want to address the other tiers as well, like
Absolutely. So BLS, all these refer to either 911 or IMTs. The only one that does not is the specialty care transports. That's only for IMTs or
Inter-facility transport.
Hospital to hospital. Sorry, explain a little more. So our services, quite a few IMTs, so we're going to go hospital to hospital, primarily going to a higher level of care. So usually our local hospitals here, Blue County or Aurora, going to them Milwaukee, Green Bay, Sheboygan, pretty much anywhere in the state we transport to. So all these, minus that specialty care, refer to either 911 or our IFT rates, our charges. So BLS would be, like I said, a basic life support call. ALS level 1 is a paramedic level call. ALS level 2 is also paramedics requiring more skills. More medication we administered, different skills we provide, and then specialty care requires a critical care paramedic. So another additional level of training we have to go to school for to take those specialty care transports. And then going down, we see BLS on scene, the ALS on scene. Those are like our, you fall, you call for help, we assess you, lift you up, that's a BLS call. ALS level on-scene care would be like a diabetic, someone's having a diabetic emergency. We call there, we give them D50 or some kind of sugar to increase their blood sugar. They wake up and more responsive, then they refuse to transfer to the hospital. That would be considered an ALS level of care. Towards the bottom, we did add a few new things. We had a vehicle/residence lockout. That's a charge we never had before. We've been getting a fair amount of calls to facilities to use our keys to get them in. This is a new thing we added, along with a bariatric charge. Primarily, we send two crew members on these calls, but for calls where they need additional help due to the size of the patients, that can occur over time for us, so we decided we should increase or add that charge to our rates. And then we just added generically a damage to equipment fees. That's just a generic thing we should have had for a long time, we just add that, so if there is damage to our equipment, we can then bill appropriately for those damages.
So the bariatric charge, I'm just curious, I hadn't paid enough attention to that. To know that you need the additional paramedic present to assist with a larger patient, is that information that's gleaned by dispatch in the course of taking the call?
Occasionally you get notification from dispatch that they are bariatric patients, that you might need more help to start. But a lot of times we don't know that. A lot of times we're on the scene for lift assist. All of a sudden it's a larger patient, and
Then,
they would call from our staff from our station to come and assist us with that patient care / movement.
okay, you find that that's, again, relatively common among the comparable agencies
Yes, it
you've
is.
looked at? And could you cite what some of our comps are when you look at this?
So we go through here, on one of these pages, I thought it was on the number page. Like the last page, I guess. So then here, we kind of look at all these services you see on this list up on top. Mainly looking at like our Chippewa, Oshkosh, Eau Claire. Some of these may be far away, but they're comfortable with the size that we are. Keel's on here, Bellers for another comparable, because Keel also did go paramedic. So they are comparable. Bellers had been paramedic for a while. As you can see here, Manitowoc Fire is on here. They are obviously our close partner. Their rates, I don't want to speak to them and why they have such low rates. Those rates, per our billing company, because we use the same billing company, should be drastically increased. But for a reason they decided not to, or I don't have the most current rates. That also could be a possibility. So, usually that's a question we have, why is Manitowoc so much lower? I don't have a good answer for that, unfortunately. I can certainly talk to the chief more, if anyone needs more information on that, I can reach out to them directly.
Again, the majority of the patients we transport are Medicare or Medicaid, and there the city has to accept assignment, so that's that's why, Mark, I know you often reference, I think our net collections as a percentage of gross billables are in the low 50% range. So I know our rates have always been designed to try to at least optimize what our Medicare and CAID reimbursement is.
Unfortunately, all healthcare in general, why the rates are so high, it is unfortunately common knowledge. It is the people who have those commercial or private insurances, you get more out of them. Medicare, Medicaid is a set rate. While it's drastically low, they have slowly increased those rates over time. But unfortunately, in our population here that we primarily take care of, Medicare, Medicaid, and supplementals that are associated with those two insurances make up 72% of our call volume. So that's a very large population.
Any questions?
Questions?
We're just gonna discuss it tonight.
Yes.
Ryan, what I'd like to see is, just verify Manitowoc, too. Manitowoc is actually one of the lowest, I think, of all counties.
Yeah, you're not even close to anyone.
And that doesn't even with us, I'm just curious to see why they're so low.
Yeah, I'll just have to reach out to them. For sure.
And this doesn't have anything to do with any of the remote areas we cover, this is just our immediate market, or
Yeah, so this is had nothing to do with like the mill rates, like we cover it's the Village of Counterville.
Okay,
Has nothing to do with that. So this is purely our rates we charge when we transport a patient to a 911 call or IFT or a hospital ambulance call.
so when we go to Connersville, the BLS emergency is a non-resident would be $1,600. Does that cover all the costs of going to Connersville?
Yes.
Could you talk about just a little bit, Ryan, while you're here, about intercepts and how what actually happens typically with an intercept? And we're engaged on those generally for surrounding departments, but with pretty modest reimbursement to the city service.
Correct. So I guess, I'm not sure how much you guys know about it, generally speaking. So anytime Mishka, that's our primary service we intercept with, sometimes, very rare occurrence, Kewanee ambulance service, but 99.9% of the time we're intercepting with Mishka ambulance. So down there you see there's level 1, level 2. That really just refers to is where we decide to transport patients. So if we transport within Manitowoc County, so let's say we're in Mishka, we transport to a local hospital within Manitowoc County, so Aurora or Wood Valley, further, we charge Mishka ambulance $250. If you go outside Manitowoc County, so primarily Green Bay, we charge $300. That's the direct charge to the service. And then Mishka, per laws of billing, since they are the transporting ambulance, they then take the rights of billing the patient out, giving the patient's insurance. Does that mean what you want as far as explanation on that?
Yes.
Or any more?
And the compensation there's pretty modest.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a lot, I guess. I don't have a number in front of me as far as how many internships we have a year. I see with Michigan, this, just top of my head, probably 50 intercepts a year, give or take. So it's a fair amount, I guess, in a way, but, if anyone wants to know why they're calling for intercept, well, Michigan is a advanced EMT level, so below paramedics. So anytime they have a call who's in cardiac, stroke, traumas, respiratory nature, pain control is a big one, because they can't administer pain medication as paramedics we can. So anytime they have a patient in their jurisdiction that needs pain medication, they call us to come and become the paramedics, become the provider in charge of that call. That's primarily why they call for intercepts, because it's above their level of what they can do for the patient care.
In this listing, I don't see anything about transports. Are we still involved with the transport patients from hospital to another facility?
I speak pretty fast. That's the IFTs or inter-facility transports. So those are, all these charges on this sheet are the same whether it's a 911 call or a inter-facility from hospital to hospital. From a billing standpoint, there's no differential between the different type of ambulance call. There's a 911 call or an IFT, hospital to hospital.
But isn't that also impacted by where the transfer is? A transfer to Madison is more expensive than it would be to Green Bay or Sheboygan, the ultimate location. Are we hit by variances in cost of transfer cost charge?
Well, yes, like obviously the longer distance, we're taking more paramedics out of service.
Right.
And or then the backstaffing, we're paying someone to come in and backstaff at a station, there's that cost associated with that. But how we do somewhat make up the difference is on here if you look at our loaded mileage. So this is proposed going up to $22 an hour, $22 a mile. Before it was 21. What that means is the longer we go with a patient, that's a loaded mileage with a patient, so it's unfortunately only a one-way charge. So if you go from Aurora Hospital to Madison, let's say that's 100 miles. That's our loaded mileage for that call. So we get paid based on the mileage of how far that is with the loaded patient. Now, once again, for Medicare, Medicaid, those are capped at a certain level, but generically speaking, we're on par with other comparables for our mileage, loaded mileage charge.
Is loaded mileage one way only, both
One
for
way.
cases where you drop the patient off and where you return the patient? Like if they go from Aurora to Rivers to Aurora Baycare for diagnostic testing, and you're literally loaded in both
Well,
directions.
I'll talk about
But
that. So we do a fair amount of weight returns. So our local hospitals are kind of limited in what they can do. So a lot of times we take a lot of patients up to Baycare for TEs, ultrasound guided procedure that Aurora can't do, or a pacemaker placement, or an IV PICC line placement that our local hospital can't do. So then we then take the patient up to Baker, and then we usually wait around for the patient to be done, because usually the procedure's under an hour, usually. So in that case, that's always 2 runs. Anytime we drop the patient off, that's 1 run. Then we take the patient back from Baker back to AMC, that's another run. So two calls, and so essentially both would be lower mileage,
Okay, thank you.
but billed twice.
Yep.
That makes sense.
So yeah, not one run round trip, if you will. Okay.
But if you return empty, it's just 1 run.
Correct.
So see, we're still incurring the cost,
Yeah.
Capital.
Correct, that's nationwide, every ambulance, there's nothing we can do about that, and unfortunately, that is the way our system's set up in a way, so.
And I don't know if there's anything to do with, the loaded miles is part of it, but also we have the hourly cost of the people who are carrying that person. And then we have replacement costs to cover the hours that are needed for the person who's driving.
Correct.
Are we addressing that, and anything we can do to improve that, or?
There's nothing we can do besides, if you guys wanna give me a few more staff members and have a larger department, we'd be doing less, transport from off duty.
So. is
That would
where-
cost you more than the revenue, sorry.
I agree.
I apologize, Councilwoman, didn't mean to cut
Oh,
you off.
that's all right. Is that where the wait time and half-hour increments coming from?
That's correct.
Okay,
So we do, if, for the wait and returns, we can get some additional, recoupment from waiting room. But, sometimes we wait, sometimes we don't, all depends on what we have going at the station, how long the patient's procedures at the hospital, the whole list of variables that go on that. So yeah, we do charge more on wait time.
Adam,
Oh, sorry, Adam, go ahead.
72% you said is Medicare, Medicaid billing.
Correct.
So is that the reason why we have to go about charges, is because they pay us so less than 3/4 of our billing goes to Medicare and Medicaid?
That is a fair assessment, correct, yeah. That's a recommendation from our billing company, nationwide. If you look at how our healthcare works, that's unfortunately what they do.
So we're shifting the burden onto those that are still off of that, most of them, not all of them, are still for the working class.
Yeah.
We're shifting that burden to them because Medicare doesn't pay.
It's private insurance thing.
Yeah, and I know it's saying, it does feel wrong, but of course, that's how our healthcare is set up to do, and how it works. I don't think it's right. But, like, so we use a third-party billing company, this is what they recommend here, to hopefully help get some increase in reimbursement. On a plus side, Medicaid came out back in 2022, and I apologize, I don't have the act in front of me, I think it was Act 128 that passed, which allowed a pretty decent increase in Medicaid reimbursement. But the problem with that is they passed that without knowing how to fully implement it. So if we haven't received any of the money yet or any of the increase, it does require all the agencies, ambulance service to do a pretty extensive worksheets and all this data we have to collect and send in to Medicaid. They are still actively, I always get emails probably once a month saying, hey, we're still working on it, bear with us. So as of now, we still haven't had any of that increase in Medicare reimbursement. At some point soon, I'm hoping, but it's the government.
Darla, you had a question?
yeah, lobbying the legislators, is that something that you are doing or have done and they're just not responsive to addressing this issue, or?
Well,
Because, I mean, Adam is completely right, I mean, you know, yes, you take care of the people, there's a cost associated, but the cities, the population is having to pay for it, which, who's setting the rates for Medicare and Medicaid? You know, but I mean, is that something, you guys have a pretty strong union, I don't know if it would be a union thing where you.
so yeah, the IFF, and then also the PFW, and also the, there's a ambulance association in Wisconsin that also does lobbying, so those three work organizations are constantly in the politician's offices doing some type of lobbying for ambulance reimbursements. I personally, that's all I can really speak about, I don't really know exactly, but I know in going to the union conventions and meetings that they have plenty of, office time, essentially trying to get these rates changed, but it's as you can imagine, almost an impossible thing to get passed.
At least at the federal level. I'm not being
For sure.
political, but our Congress people know that Social Security and Medicare are headed for a funding cliff. And so far, the bus we're all on seems to be headed closer and closer to that cliff. So it'd be nice if we had responsible leadership, and I don't care which party you pick, I'm sorry. We're not doing it. And that's a big reason why private pay subsidizes so much of our healthcare infrastructure too. I'm no expert on this, but it's frankly blatant irresponsibility to address issues that are very soon going to be confronting us.
And I get it, it's all within healthcare, I get that aspect of it. The part that bothers me is we all pay taxes to our ambulance service. And I get it covers the ambulances, the personnel, but it sucks then that the other people that are not on Medicaid and Medicare are gonna subsidize those that are on Medicaid and Medicare. That's what bothers me. I get it happens at the doctor's office, but we're not paying taxes to the doctor's office. We're paying for our fire police.
So if I can just add one thing,
Fire paramedics.
add one quick thing to that comment. I agree with you, I don't think it's necessarily right, but, and of course, that's where we live in and how healthcare works, but on the sheet, you do see that from 22 to 25, our resident rate only increased, I think across the board, mostly $100. So we do have our non-resident rate, so that is always like that, we did increase that, so the difference is $200, and the difference, sorry, $300 between the resident and non-resident, I take the BLS level, and going all the way down across the board, they are about $300 difference. So, meaning that our non-residents who don't pay taxes are, in theory, paying more for the ambulance service that they receive.
But they're still paying less with that use of Medicare.
Correct.
Yeah, again, our intent would be to present this as an ordinance amendment at the next regular meeting next week, Tuesday, unless there's direction to do otherwise.
Anything else? Nothing else? Okay. On to B then. Discussion of possible referrals to Plan Commission regarding possible ordinance amendments to address concerns from residents regarding neighborhood impacts of vacation rentals, outdoor lighting, and other issues. Recommended action is no action, just identifying material matters to be referred for further review by staff.
Yeah, the thought is if council is inclined to consider some actions, then obviously there's more homework needed to be done. This is on the agenda partly as a result of Bonnie's communication to council and myself 2 or 3 weeks ago now, noting the citizen contacts that she has had and the rest of you have had. I've heard from other council members, including Scott and Mark, who've heard from residents. I expect, I know that Mr. and Mrs. Robitaille have been in touch with some concerns. They're here tonight, and I believe the discussion has been, at least from the chair, that the council would allow for public input on this issue. That's not the norm at work sessions, but it's been honored in the breach as much as we've made it a rule. I think we're fairly user-friendly in that area. We don't have any specific staff proposals here, so this is more of an opportunity for the council to hear directly from these citizens or anybody else that may have been interested in the agenda. But likewise for the council to have some discussion and get a sense of where you stand on these matters. There are some other things that have been cited in the context of discussions about vacation rentals, like neighborhood parking impacts and other things. But the two that seem to be most outstanding, and I'm not pretending that the only folks we've heard from are Mr. and Mrs. Robitaille. There's been a limited number of contacts, but there have been from a few. residents of the community. But these are some of the topics that were touched on. I do have copies, if you want to refer to them, you have received copies with citizen submittals of sample lighting ordinances for Egg Harbor and Wheaton, Illinois, and those I trust you've taken a look at and maybe somewhat familiar with. So with that, I offer it up for council discussion.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. President, I'd suggest these are very important topics, for three of them here, I'd like to see you start with outdoor lighting, because I think Susan and her husband have done a lot of research and work with that. They've uncovered some interesting information, and maybe we start with that, because I think that would be the easiest to address. The other ones were going to be more extensive.
Yeah. Do you want to go ahead, Susan?
Yes.
Do you just want to?
Can
You can sit there. You can stand right in front of the middle of us, or sit right
I'll
next
just,
to Lisa.
I'll just sit here.
Proximity is good.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Andre went through a lot of effort to make some documents, but I'm just gonna give you the QR code. You can look at it later. I kind of paraphrase, because Susan did up a little bit to make it more digestible to the everyday man. I joke with him that it's like he writes the King James version of the Bible and I make the message. In all my adult life of living in Milwaukee for the last 35 years, I think I spoke in front of the city hall one time. And all of a sudden, here I meant to come up and just live a quiet little life. Here I am again. So, all right. Two Rivers lacks light nuisance ordinances, leaving residents without guidance on acceptable lighting and stripping them of any recourse when excessive and intrusive lighting from neighboring properties disrupts their right to enjoy their own homes. While the city does have lighting requirements for construction, I have observed the Plan Commission not enforcing these standards during building plan reviews. The ordinance mandates full cutoff lighting, yet it does not require that they be installed correctly. This oversight has been used by both the city and property owners who use code mandated full cutoff lights, which are supposed to go like this, but then they go on to install them right side up, pointing out, or even as flood lamps, directing light at nearby homes. An example of this would be next to Rogers Fishing Village. The full cutoff lights are shining out to illuminate the fishing village, but they're also blasting light into the neighboring homes. So in the absence of clear laws, everything becomes subjective and opinion-based. And what might be the surface of the sun to one person might be, well, this gives me the illusion of safety to another. What recourse is there for a person in this situation? The lack of ordinances have been confirmed in discussions with the chief of police, the city zoning administrator, and the former community development director. It's just my humble opinion, but this lack of clear language in our ordinances allows for bad actors. Perhaps there was a time in the city where bright lighting was not an issue, or we could count on our neighbors to behave rightly. But with so many of our properties being bought up by outside business operators who do not live here and are therefore not affected by the lighting, we are left with having to craft some new and crystal clear ordinances to protect residents from excessive light nuisance. There are many people who do not complain or don't realize that maybe there is something that can be done about this. My own friend down the street was having a spotlight from a public light shining into her daughter's bedroom every night, and they just quietly took it upon themselves to simply hang blackout curtains rather than come to the city to address the improperly installed cutoff lights. You look up at some people's window and notice they have a blanket hanging over their windows. For some people, suffering quietly is just what they have come to think is what is expected of them. So 2 issues. The language about full cutoff lights needs to include how they are to be installed properly so that the light shines down and not outward. Lights are and not spread into the neighboring homes. The second issue is for private properties and what constitutes a considered amount of lighting. It is normal for cities to have complete codes written up on this, including our neighbor to the south, Manitowoc, who has some fine common sense lighting codes. We could easily borrow language from them when crafting some codes for us. Even better would be for us to look at cities like Egg Harbor, Wisconsin, or Wheaton, Illinois. These two cities have adopted Dark Sky Society guidelines for their lighting ordinances. Why would Two Rivers be an amazing place to feature Dark Sky Society guidelines? I'll tell you. One would be for better health for all living things, from wildlife to human beings. I did a brief Google search for, why is light pollution bad? And I would have thought I had Googled, why is smoking a pack of cigarettes a day bad? Excessive night lighting, even the smallest amount, can disrupt our melatonin production, which can lead to a whole host of emotional disturbances, anxiety, anger issue, depression, even cancer, if you can believe that. I am even more disturbed now that I've been reading up on this. And it can also fully explain why I and the neighbor on the other side of the property between us have been so wound up about their use of excessive lighting night after night. But aside from human beings, we have our wildlife to be concerned about. Bats, owls, other nocturnal animals are being driven out of the area with excessive and improperly installed lighting. From a purely financial benefit from Two Rivers adopting Dark Sky Society guidelines, this could be a huge tourist draw for us, as it would set us apart from other localities and invite people to enjoy our night sky events, and it wouldn't cost us much of anything. We just had the incredible Northern Lights show a couple months back, and we could have really capitalized on that by inviting people into the city to see the Northern Lights, unlike anywhere else in northeastern Wisconsin, without having to drive that extra distance to get up to Egg Harbor in Door County. We could have full moon viewings, stargazing events, moonlight cruises in the harbor and up the river, and maybe a side gig by our fishing charter folks. Our natural beauty here in Two River is our strongest draw, and adding a cool feature like adopting the Dark Sky guidelines would make an additional interesting draw for people to come and see. I know the city's visionaries cared about the health of the citizens, as shown by Mr. Hamilton donating the community center and Mr. Eggers footing the bill for the fitness center, which I use quite a bit. I see there are yoga on the beach programs, walking and biking groups. Let's add one more thing to make us unique and special in the area that would also help improve the overall health of the community, and maybe not use the ambulances. That segue just wrote itself for me. All right, now, some might fear, but what about safety? We can't just leave it pitch dark so the bad guys can sneak around and do their things. I have to defer this part back to Andre, as he's spent his adult life working in cybersecurity, including the red team at SecureWorks, and they were responsible for ethically penetrating into building security by all means possible. The topic of lighting and security is something well studied, and the truth is, there is no correlation that more light means less crime. There are many studies that say that light can actually increase crime, car break-ins, drug-related crimes. Proper lighting is the key. Low voltage, full cutoff lights are optimal. Excessive bright lighting creates shadows and glare and actually reduces visibility. That QR code I have given each of you is a more in-depth look at these topics I touched on here tonight. They are examples of other cities' light ordinances that we can easily use as a guide. There's also a link explaining the Dark Sky Society and their lighting guidelines. If you have questions, we are happy to try and answer them for you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for inviting me and continually listening when we have problems with this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have looked into the lighting stuff in Two Rivers, your codes that are already here. Let's see, I just took, bits and pieces, so this might sound But, sufficiently lighting to ensure safety, that's okay. The lighting must be shielded, is what it says in our ordinances. Not be of intensity to create glare, meaning not only to the cars coming, but to adjoining properties, or become a hazard, like I said, to vehicles. Parking lot, to avoid light spill, even in a parking lot. This is zoning, 1 to 3. You illuminate only the building, on your lot without adversely affecting the adjacent lots or traffic. I can't read my own writing. And vision of exterior light directed away from any residential, and I keep saying residential because it specifically says that. Drive-in business, any lighting directed away from residential building codes. Even, the light is to be directed away from residential areas. Let's see, Two Rivers has full cut-off lighting, but doesn't require that it be installed correctly. Well, I guess that must be from a note. The whole point, even in industrial, you can have it there, lights there, but away from residential. Now, I don't know, to me that makes it sound like they have a point, that this Airbnb should not be letting its light flood into the neighbors' yards. That's really all they're asking. And if you've seen the pictures, those lights are pretty bright. And nobody's against motion light. I just wanted, the other thing I wanted to read was the Egg Harbor, this is how they introduced their regulations to short-term rentals. The regulation, I skipped stuff. The regulations herein are intended to guarantee the rental of a property, that the rental of a property is compatible with the neighborhood in which it's located and does not disrupt the peace, health, safety, or visual appeal of the village. And we're small enough that I feel that can apply to us. In addition, all licensing, there's a lot of stuff I'm skipping, okay? In addition, all licensing applicants are held to uniform standards. I mean, the thing is, it's already in our codes, and if you have to amend something to just say all short-term rentals cannot let their lights trespass into somebody else's yard, it seems to me that's all you need to do for lights anyway.
Short-term rentals would fall into residential, they're not zone business.
Yeah, but nobody's supposed to let their lights.
Right, so it's already there though.
Well,
Well, I mean, my point is they have, at least for the lights, you can say that they have a reasonable request to not have to do that.
I don't disagree with the contention that we need to do more about enforcing installation being proper. It doesn't help to have zero cutoff fixtures if they're cocked up at an angle so they become floodlights. And I may have missed it, but I think we have references as it relates to new development, because site and architectural plan approval is supposed to include the lighting review and typically does. But that doesn't address the 99% of the community that's already here. So that I think would, say, somebody moves in next door to you in a house that was built in 1890 and puts festoon lights and, floodlights that shine over onto your property. I don't think our existing codes are sufficient there. Frankly, this may be a very good idea as an addition to our zoning code or other codes, but it probably should be addressed as, okay, maybe a problem that's come to light as a result of a short-term rental, but if you're going to apply it, you'd best apply it to all properties. Our city attorney may have some comment on that too.
Well,
This isn't specific. We know of instances where it's
You shouldn't apply it to all people. I'm not trying to zero them out. I'm just saying, this must have been a problem of some sort because they keep saying your lights should not be crossing the border of the property. And they specifically would say into residential areas. I mean, okay, you don't want the short-term rentals to be business, but but they are next door to residences, residential property.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that, I'm just saying if bright light is shining onto my property, it's a problem that I want the city to address. That's a problem regardless of whether the neighboring property is a short-term rental or a permanent resident. Light is light regardless of where it comes from. And I think
They came to my house, told me I had to shut my light off or I was getting a ticket.
it may not have been 100% enforced, but it's been enforced to an extent. And I know we look at it with plans. Are we following up out in the field? I can't sit here and say that we are in all cases. You know, someone showed zero cutoff lights to the installation, mesh with that. Maybe we're not always following up as we should. But that still doesn't, I don't think the provisions of our code as they exist, that's great for new development that goes through site and architectural plan approval. If I all of a sudden decide to put up motion detector security lights that pick up cars on the street and that flood my neighbor's property, or I decide I got a heck of a deal on festival lights at, you know, one of the home supply places, and I outline my whole backyard and run them 24/7, I don't know that I fall under what our code currently says. That's part of the problem. The property on Jefferson Street that we've referenced that's perceived as a problem ain't new. It didn't go through site plan review. It's simply an existing property where somebody chose to put up lights. So.
Yes, Mark.
That's why I knew that this discussion, it's good discussion, but would feel a lot of various paths of discussion and directions. I wanted to focus on the lighting ordinance. And the lighting ordinance, I think, applies to everybody. I don't care if you're a McDonald's or a museum or a home. It's an overnight stay. I don't care. It's focused to everybody. And these suggestions I'm hearing, and I researched the paperwork you provided, are new additions from other communities that have benefited from it. So I think what we ought to consider is what suggestions she's made that are new and beyond what we have in our lighting ordinance, and consider if we want to adapt them for the benefit of all citizens. It doesn't have to be commercial, it doesn't have to be existing overnight stay places for the value of the community. And I think there's some good points we can consider.
So if someone complains, do the police go there and tell them that they should shut them off like they did in Eden?
The police do, or inspections, maybe the ones.
But then that should solve the issue unless they turn it back on. If they turn it back on, they come there again, they get told to turn it off, and if they come there a third time, they get a ticket.
In some cases where it's obvious, yes, we do, but in other cases, it's not so obvious. Like, for instance, a floodlight shining directly at somebody's house would be moved on this one. Something where it's canted, maybe not perfectly, or some other type of lighting, there's numerous different lightings. I would argue that the city could benefit from probably some improvements to that lighting ordinance, and then also weighing that out or simplify it so that it can be enforced. There's other times where the police department will get something, and it could be a city issue. So like the city manager brought up, there's instances, and I'm not sure about the fishing village, but there's been other instances like that where we've been notified, the city's been notified, Brian Delvin's staff has been notified, and they've gone out and corrected the issue because it wasn't otherwise done. So there's numerous different aspects to this enforcement of said.
Other than the electric utility, I don't know that anybody has light meters that we go out with, for example.
Correct, or knowing how far it flows.
Yeah, we have dB meters for noise. I think we need to make that investment for that seriously. That's the other thing, of course, you can respond on a complaint by complaint basis. It does take enforcement resources when you put something new on the books, if you seriously intend to follow up. But there's obviously lots of examples. There is merit. There are a lot of folks see benefits, environmental benefits. Maybe the EAB might have some input on it. I don't know if this ultimately resides in the zoning ordinance or not, or if it'd be better in another part of the code, because it's almost to abate or avoid a nuisance situation. Maybe it's the nuisance portion of the code, which I prefer because it's a whole lot simpler to amend from time to time. But we, as was pointed out, we've got other communities in fairly close proximity that have these ordinances.
This is City Attorney Sean Griffin. Another point to consider here is if it's in the zoning code, we're gonna run into the issue that it would be permissible to continue some of these lights as non-conformities. So we'll have to also keep that in mind, which might go to Greg's point as to putting this in the nuisance section. Because if we're trying to regulate things that were lawfully placed, then they'd be potentially or likely be legal non-conforming uses under the city code. And that's gonna take a lot of teeth out of the potential enforcement of this.
Point well taken.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. Councilmember Bill Leclerc did drive past your home one evening to see what the problem was, and he could not see a problem.
You can't see it from the street.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll tell you, I made the offer to another person who's got the same complaints as you, that I was available, I would come over to her house at any time so that I could see what was going on. She refused me my entry to her property. She told me that I could see the issue from a bridge. To me, then the problem must not be
You're
that
welcome
great.
to come over. Come over tonight. I'll make you white food. No, but seriously, you're welcome to come over.
All right, well, let's try that and then as far as like party lights, are we talking party lights or fairy lights or what are we talking?
She's got, well, that situation between us is what tipped this off, but this problem is bigger than just what's going on next door. But she's got festoon lights or those party lights and then she's got another structure where I don't know what they're called, they're like just naked bulbs.
Oh, I know you're
They're also festoon lights, but they're bright, and I think I counted, I can't remember, no, it was 12 or 24. They line, and it's like being next to a used car lot. And so if you come up to our house, you can look at one side. If you scan that QR code, you can also see Ridley and Kate Gadd's house. They've tried communicating, because we've been told by folks, just talk to your neighbor. Like, we're getting out the grown-ups, right?
Have you talked to your neighbor, the owner?
She's not our neighbor. This is a property that is being run as a business. It is owned by someone that doesn't live in Two Rivers. She operates it is an Airbnb, so it's a private residence, but it's not really private. It's that semantics game. It's a house,
Right,
but it's a business.
I get it, but I mean, have you had a conversation with her?
So Rit and Kate have. And we included some text messages in this queue, so you can see what this
Okay.
person, where they sent her pictures of the house at like 3 a.m. Their backyard looks like you're next to a billboard, you know what I mean? It's bright. And they sent it to her kind of like, it's axiomatic, like, look at how bright this is. And the response from the owner of the home was so. And they're like, well, our backyard is
Okay.
really, really bright right now. And her response was unsympathetic. She's like, I don't care. Mind your own business. They're like, this is our yard, this is our business. And so we had to even call the police yesterday about noise with this property. This is a property that's owned by someone with tremendous hubris. The rules don't apply to her. She's not in the house to be affected by the light. She does not care how it affects my family. She does not care how it affects Kate and Britt's family. It's shoehorned in between these other, it's a myriad of issues.
Right.
I'll just stick to the light thing. It's enough where if I'm ready to put a for sale sign in my front yard, I'm sorry, I get emotional, right? And I'm being told to die with
Well,
that.
I'll tell you, I mean, if we were able to base something like that on lumens and directional, because point taken, it's not just your Airbnbs or your STRs. I've gotten phone calls from people who live next door to residents who were there having the issue. All right, and I know that the police department gets those calls. And they're addressed, you know, it's come one, come all type of thing. I would like to come over and I want to see it firsthand. I wish I could see it from the other lady's perspective, because when I'm across the bridge to look over there, I don't know what property
There's
it is.
photographs in that QR code of our backyard and then of Kate Britt's backyard. And then of the Edwards house, their side of it, so two houses
Is it up for me to just show you them now for the sake of the discussion? I can just walk over right now to show you.
Yeah, why don't you, if you don't mind?
It might just.
It'll make life a lot easier.
Okay.
All right, Scott, I think the key is, we need to see the ordinances suggested, because they solve the problem. It doesn't relate to an overnight stay. It's a solution for the problem. It's not offensive, it'll work all over the city, and that's what we should really focus on. First, consider these suggestions of ordinance changes. They're simple, and they're pretty worthwhile communities that has worked.
Okay, she's.
Otherwise, we're gonna get very down on a lot of other issues related to the light.
From what I've listened to on Bonnie say, I think the ordinance covers it, maybe we gotta be more strict and say how many lumens, like Darla's pointed out, can be in crossing over into a neighbor's yard. I don't wanna get too strict on this, some people like light, I do. I don't know that I want someone dictating what happens at my house, and if I have tested lights that I want out, because that's what I like, I keep lights on in my house all night long. So I mean, what bothers me may not bother someone else, but vice versa, it shouldn't affect me because it affects someone else either. At the same time, it shouldn't be spilling over crazy into someone else's yard. And I think that's the key that needs to just be addressed, is how many movements can cross over. And motion lights should be an exception, in my opinion, because whether or not there's a study that says it's safe or not doesn't really matter, because it's what makes you feel safe is safety to you. Some people want to carry a gun, some people don't. Some people think it makes them safe, some people don't. We don't require you to carry a gun or not require you to carry a gun, so someone should tell me whether or not motion lights make me feel safe or not.
Scott,
Yeah.
can we all take just a moment and just scan that QR code and look at what they're talking about, because it's way worse than I was expecting. Way worse. Did you look
I've
at
seen
it?
it before.
We've got those pictures before.
Yeah.
I never.
I said that.
She emailed us. To everyone.
Well, I didn't see it, sorry about that, but I mean, it's pretty dramatic.
Well, as long as if the safety lights or the, motion lights, they would have to be angled down, so they're not just
Well,
illuminating
they should.
everybody, right?
They should be illuminating down, but that's not to say there won't be some crossover. If I'm covering the side of my house, is that gonna cover some of your side property? Probably.
Yeah, I mean, my neighbor has a super obnoxious bare bulb out there, and I hate it, but, I mean, it's, you know, it's not nearly what they're dealing with, but I'm just saying, like, you know, I feel safer having a motion detector light in the back of my house, but I just make sure that it's not,
I mean, the amount of spillage they deal
Yeah,
with is
obnoxious.
not right.
Yeah, that
By no
is-
means. We just gotta figure out a number of lumens that spillage is allowed, because you're gonna get some. I mean, you can't put a wall up and say nothing crosses this. I mean,
So
that's
it's a reflection of shade.
it's gonna
Solve the problem.
And if they're not motion detector for safety's sake, that there should be, that it should be followed, that there should be lights out for a certain period of time. It's like those photos, what'd you say, 2:30 in the morning?
The ones I just showed you, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's gotta be some common sense, and, I think that we're gonna have to be a lot stricter with the people who have Airbnbs. And I know one thing is that, I did a little reading too, and it's like, neighborhood complaints have dropped drastically because, people are really starting to write up rules for guests saying like, what do they call it, no rager parties. This is not a party house, this is, you know, and really be on top of that to make sure that the city has, their contact info, so if there is an issue, they can be contacted right away. I mean, there's pros and cons. The cons to Airbnb for me is our house inventory is so bad And we don't want to see a lot of these structures being taken away or taken off the market for sale. But then again, there's side hustles. We want people to be able to do what they want to do with their property. So it's just kind of, and another thing too is that, and I think we talked about this the other day, was the stay of the guest has to be at least a week or 2 weeks. That's the minimum. So it's not just for 3 days or 3 nights. It's for longer periods of time than that.
Attorney Griffin, if you can help me out, if I understand, state statute limits us to regulating as short-term rentals. Anything, it has to be 7 days or less, or under 7 days. So 6, if I.
That's correct. You're correct on that. Yeah, the statute limits the ability of municipal governments to regulate short-term rentals for those durations.
Okay. So help me out, if I might. Then the same property, if I'm staying there for 6 days, I'm under one set of rules, or potentially because of the city's ordinance. But if I'm renting it for 2 solid weeks.
Yes, you'd be under a different set of rules. Of course, the city could pass ordinances that are in compliance with the more restrictive, or I guess in this case, the less restrictive, and make it the same for both. But there is a differentiation after you have a week.
Okay. Just to remind folks of that.
Chief, do you have something on that?
Honestly, Adam covered the side that I want everybody to be aware of too. I appreciate Mark's side, but I think Adam's is just as important, because there are 2 sides, and I think a majority of the current public is also worried about concerns of security and safety. And whether it be true or not, it's the perception of that. And I think we've learned in a lot of these different circumstances how important perception is in this community. So I would be cognizant of that too when you make an overall change in policy. The other part is when you're talking about something like lumens, I'm just going to tell you flat out, I don't have officers that are trained in lighting. So the majority of the enforcement that you're talking about will take other staff time, because we might have the officers go at night taking pictures and photographs of said information, but that's going to be reported to the electrical company or water and light, to go and investigate and do those things. So it's not just going to be the PD, it's going to be other resources, because we're not experts in lighting. There's no quick little device that's going to help us with that.
Okay. So is there any consensus on the limited issue of new ordinance language relating to outdoor lighting? I guess that's one fairly well-defined issue. There's other things we're going to be talking about, I think, with short-term rentals generally. But
Well, again, I don't think it has to do with the short-term rental, it's policy for everybody.
right.
And I think if we do it correctly, I agree with that too. Security doesn't have to be part of it. We're not gonna restrict security of an individual with security lights. If we read and study what the other communities have listed as changes, we'll see that it doesn't offend a person's security. It merely protects the direction and light impact on the surrounding communities and people around you. It's pretty simple. So I would like to see at least review some of the key communities around us that have taken some of these suggestions to fix their problem without impacting the person's security. Or right to turn on a light or turn it off, just directing it so it doesn't impact people around you as much as it's currently.
Doug?
As much as I would love night sky lighting and bird-friendly lighting, I don't think we can mandate homeowners to hire an electrician to install lighting. I don't think that would be right or fair. I mean, we get upkeep over a $2 fee on a water bill, and now you want to spend hundreds of dollars on lights. I don't think that would fly very well. As much as I would enjoy that, I mean, I love driving out to the country at night and stargazing myself. I don't think that would be fair or equitable to the whole city.
Okay. Yes, Matt?
Again, I think it can be improved, but I think you gotta take all lighting into account too, like Christmas lighting, everything. Halloween decorations, all that stuff, you know, personally, I'm fine with a little bit of decorations, but I think everybody's got their preference. I don't necessarily like 15 blow-up animals in my yard, you know, for Christmas decorations, but some do. So really, take into account all those things if you're going to fix this work.
I don't.
And there's landscape lighting,
Yeah,
I keep my landscape lighting on.
All that stuff is different because you're supposed to put it, if you want landscape lighting, you don't shine it at your neighbor's window, you shine it on a piece of work of landscape that you want featured.
Well, some there's landscape lighting on video, it goes around their gazebo or whatever it's called. That's part of the problem, that's landscape lighting.
Well, the other thing I wanted to say that a lot of these other cities they actually prefer motion lights. That's what they go out at. And a motion light, I think, is a better, thing that deters crime. Because if you're sneaking in somebody's backyard and suddenly the light goes on, you're not sure where it's coming from. That's because my neighbor across the street saw that. He saw my neighbor's light go on and the guys ran away from there. But I'm not sure if I heard, I can't, what did you say about, were you talking about installing lights?
Yeah, if we were to if we were to say this is a night sky city, every household would need to upgrade their lighting to compliant lights, right?
Yeah, that'd be hard.
I mean, that would in essence be a burden cost on a lot of the residents. You know, I'm at the point in my life where I don't put in my own electricity anymore. I hire an electrician and that's not cheap. So, that's my take. I don't know.
Anything else? I think we've kind of come to the census that something needs to change or updated.
You can pick up a light meter for checking lumens, just if we have some kind of, something for spillage. Not that much. Or fuel, obviously that's a nuisance.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
I encourage you to at least look at Manitowoc's light ordinances before making any decisions. There's provisions in there for Christmas lights and all these things that you've raised. It's a lot less complicated than like this and like things like lower watt bulb, or just make sure, like, instead of, Shannon, you said you have a neighbor with a raw bulb, like, have an ordinance that it has to be shielded. You know, there are some very simple fixes, so it's, you know, we don't have to rebuild Rome. Just, I would recommend looking at some of those other cities' light ordinances and seeing like, oh, we can do this, this isn't, and it doesn't require high tech stuff.
Manitowoc's ordinance is relatively brief. Interesting, holiday lighting, which is defined pretty much for a period not to exceed 90 days. Doesn't say you can't leave it up all year round, which I know we all love to see, but at least that's not infringing on your property.
Yeah.
Then, I don't know what you do about all those deflated, inflatable things that are just kind of depressing to see. You know, it's kind of sad to see Santa and Rudolph all like they expired in somebody's yard, but that's not what we're talking about. So, yeah, but simple things like a 4-minute or 5-minute max on cycle for that security light, or that it not be triggered by movement on the public right of way. I'm not sure that's gonna solve all the problems. And seriously, if you have festoon lights in your backyard, and I get it, some uses like vacation rentals, people may be they're on holiday every weekend, we're the average family, but there are some families that are partying every weekend in the warm weather too. I don't know that I want to be told to turn my festoon lights at 11 o'clock by God every night. If you have an event and you have company over, that's what you have it back. So we will bring some things back and at least will be a basis for discussion. I'm hearing, based on the council president's interpretation of my loose interpretation, some interest, and we're not going to invest an enormous amount of staff time. I'll be talking with the city attorneys. I thank you, Sean, for that input, trying to address this as a zoning issue, I think would be problematic in a lot of respects, most notably doing it as an existing use, but we'll take a look at that. Okay,
Good.
that's the low hanging fruit out of what we have to discuss.
So then outdoor lighting's done. What about vacation rentals? What have people heard about vacation rentals? Besides lighting, vacation rentals.
Do they need a conditional use permit?
They do not presently. They need a permit from the city, which pretty much gathers some information above and beyond what the county collects, like who's your maintenance person, who's the person to get in touch with in the event of problems.
It's definitely not in all cases, but in some instances, not yours, and maybe not even yours, people live in those vacation rentals, and they just rent them out from time to time.
Yeah.
It
Like
can
when
actually be,
PGA, they go on
right,
vacation.
yes, it can actually be your house.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's Brian's original intent.
I think, yeah, and some folks have suggested a change could be that the owner has to reside on premises pick a number, 6 months out of the year, 7 months. And I believe Madison and some Door County communities are examples of that.
But a lot of communities have been sued for that very ordinance. By their
I heard that.
association.
It's been upheld in every case they've been sued. On every case. Certain ones got knocked down where they didn't conform to what the laws were, but if you look at like Holland, they only knocked down the ones where they were outside of what the state allowed. So if you are under 6 days, you can outright, not that I'm suggesting this, you can outright ban them as a city if the states are 6 days or less. You have almost full authority as long as it's not a de facto prohibition. So, not that I'm suggesting, but you do have full range to do pretty much whatever you want in that way.
That I think we have to look into, because I've read a lot, and I've seen that as a fact, that you have full range. And I think it also would impact some of the appeal to that business or operator. Certain people won't want the owner to be in the house, but that's what they do. They bring families and they use the entire house. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know that the ordinances for reference requires the owner to be present at the time of the rental. I mean, there are some that are effectively duplexes, but I think it's more like, well, it's my home seasonally, and in the off season I rent it. Unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say that, but our winter demand isn't robust yet for vacation use. And I'll say it, I don't vote on this, but there have been positive community impacts. I would subjectively argue. There have been some real dog properties that have been upgraded with considerable investment. And I have heard from people that say they've enjoyed dealing with the vacation renters that have visited next to them. That may not be universally true. There are downsides too. I get in trouble every time I say this, but there are people that live here year round you wouldn't want for your neighbors either. So, nobody who's watching right now, but
It's true though.
it is.
We get those complaints all the time.
And
And they keep coming. I mean, she can speak that, she has some with them where they just don't get along. It's a year-round thing. And then the same people live next to each other.
But there are communities where there's been considerable pushback because, South Haven, Michigan, their group that's concerned, and I think in that town of 6,000-7,000 people, there are several hundred vacation rentals. And they have a group called Neighborhoods Need Neighbors, that kind of making the point that you need people that have that ownership. And this is a really subjective term, there's a tipping point out there, and probably by the time you feel you're at it, you're already past it or heading past. I don't know that we're at that point.
Do you know how many vacation rentals we have in the city?
I meant to quickly check that. I think the official number from the county numbers in the 40s.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Robitaille.
Chief Minor and I aren't exactly sure based on whether the annexed county addresses count or not, so it's somewhere between 71 and 82 active listings at this time, all for full homes, not for owner occupied renting groups.
So is
And
this,
we have I think the number that's shown on the website is 29 licensed, which may be slightly out of date,
Yep.
but it is somewhere, the range somewhere between 71 and 82 active full house listings. And that doesn't include vacation homes, that's just short-term rentals, Airbnb, Vrbo, et cetera.
so that's based on what you see on the online platforms?
That's correct.
But how far out do you have your bubble?
Yeah.
You know,
City limits.
What is the radius? If you go within.
City limits.
City limits?
City.
I'm coming up with like under 30 when I do that. I'll get up to the 70s and 90s if I go out into the county.
I pulled it today from your DNA, and that includes all the platforms, you can click on
I
and see
have-
the photos.
We have less than
I
2%
looked at
that are Airbnb. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I've looked at AirDNA and I don't think that's accurate.
You
I don't think-
you can literally click on the dots and see the homes.
Well, then if there's illegal STRs out there, we need to know about it so we can start collecting room tax.
And licenses, if they don't have a license, we collect the
Let's
fees.
go.
Certainly the number that are and I know we lag the county in terms of the number registered in the city, but the county, is nowhere close to that. And I'm not saying there aren't a lot flying under the radar, or some at least.
Yes, Ben?
I just wanted to clarify that when my name was brought up, that conversation, it wasn't that I also saw 80. It's that it brought up that you thought there was 80. The last I saw 2, I thought there was more in the 40s. And I warned that some of those were also township residents, because I explained that some of the cookie cutouts, for instance, over near the beach, Memorial Drive, there are county properties that are within the jurisdiction, so just be aware of that. So just clarifying. That's not to say that I don't also believe that there could be some, but I was not in the number of 80, so I just want to be clear, because I saw Carlos stare over at me very quickly.
Do we know how many households are in the city of Traverse?
Right around 5,000.
It's my thought too.
And if you take the higher number of, let's say 70, the percentage of Airbnbs to privately owned homes is,
1.4%.
Yeah, that's pretty minuscule.
I think
Yeah, I was just curious with that.
honestly, part of it, I think too, I don't know if this sheds any light, but there are a lot of destination communities that if you look for vacation rentals, they're in multi-unit, medium to high density condo or apartment developments. That's a different flavor. If you Google Traverse City vacation rentals, maybe Sturgeon Bay to an extent. And I don't know that those create the sensitivities or the friction points that vacation rentals primarily in single family neighborhoods do, because people are used to kind of, a more transient population, or, just up the road in Door County, you've got so many vacation rental condo developments, that's a whole industry. It would help if someday we have, say on the Hamilton property or other places, multi-tenant buildings that could be accommodating more vacation rentals. We don't currently, so I don't know how you factor that in, because there are, I think, a couple units that are registered over at St. Luke's Apartments next door. There are some, but for the most part, they're single family homes, boom, in single family neighborhoods. So,
Doug?
When this started first coming up, I questioned people that I know that live in certain neighborhoods that I know there's STRs, and they're like, they weren't even aware that they were there. Including the ones that we're talking about on Jefferson Street. I've talked to people that live in that neighborhood and they weren't even aware that it's an Airbnb. So yeah.
Anything else?
Regarding just the neighborhood impacts of the vacation homes.
Mhm.
I know there's an individual that's concerned about the safety if nobody's keeping track of kind of who's staying there, and if something happened, how do we trace that back to, who was staying there? type of a thing.
That would go back to whoever rented, I would assume.
Right,
I mean, whoever is the renter.
There's
Right.
there's a requirement that they have to keep a log of who rents it. That's a requirement from the county and the state.
Okay,
Kind of like a hotel registry, they gotta.
yeah, she was
keep
concerned, because she's like, well, at a hotel, you would have like, you know, a registry or a driver's license or a credit card, something to
Right.
kind of show who you, verify who you are, and she just wasn't sure if that was happening, you know, at an Airbnb that, or a short-term rental. You know, which is the amount of people coming and going, she was concerned about it in her neighborhood.
Well, it's part of the requirement. I don't know how they enforce it, the county.
It, with regard, I've spoken to that one resident, so it was just referenced, and it does sound like the term of the rental, at least for the folks that are currently there, has greatly exceeded 6 or 7 days. It's been ongoing, so
Yeah.
there may be a zoning question because it's a single-family neighborhood, but as far as it being an STR, and I think it probably has been at different times, but the issue of immediate concern wouldn't meet the definition of an STR.
Right.
July 10, actually effective July 1 of 2024. Again, this is just the county's list. There were 44 in the city. Again, not saying there aren't more than that, but that was the official number from Manitowoc County. Chief.
I guess the one thing that I would agree with them, that I'd be concerned about is none of the restrictions that they're held to or anything make it ill beings if you don't know the actual number. So I would be interested in knowing, like, maybe the ones that are sneaking through and how we can better identify those so that we can pull those accountable short-term rentals. I think that's something that maybe we can look at to see if, one, there is an issue, if there is some outstanding number, but that would be of interest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A little investigation on that. Yep, and going to the maps with the pins that show the locations when you're on Booking or one of the online platforms. I gather that's the sort of thing, Andre, you, like if you go to Booking or some of Booking.com or some of the others, and just see properties that are flagged as options in a community.
The easiest thing to do, in my opinion, is to pay a month worth of AirDNA, select the area, and it's a map of the area that has dots all over it. When you push them, you see the house. Now, there may be some investigation as far as, okay, well, I see it's this street, what exact address is it? So, you know, it may take you 10, 15 minutes to do every single dot on the map, but it would give you some feeling for, well, we know what this one's flexing, we don't, let's go figure this out. So I don't know what level of effort that is to go all the way through, are they actually doing this or not, but they are showing up as an active list.
And Darla, you mentioned lobbying. Here's a perfect example. I'm no expert on this, but when our legislature passed a law saying the online booking platforms have to collect and remit to individual cities their room tax, I understand when that bill got introduced, it was, oh, and by the way, provide the subsidiary detail of the addresses that this, and we have to keep that in confidence. We don't share, room tax numbers for any of our hotel motels. But that got stripped away through the sausage making, and we get quarterly payments from the platforms that are like, yep, this is the payment for this quarter for Two Rivers. That's insane. It's with a couple of keystrokes that information's available, but it's not mandated to be provided. And assuming that's how they're renting primarily is, through the online platforms, there's a lot of good information we can get. We're not getting it.
You know, what Andre is saying too, I mean, if there's a way that we can go through and find who's, not complying to, because then we're out, room tax, not dollars. It might just be worth it just to go ahead and do that and make sure that everybody's complying with, that something's not getting snuck through.
That's what I bring up. I think all of us are probably looking at the same platform as far as how many are out there.
Right.
But clearly, it sounds like he's looking at additional resources on what's up there.
Right.
And maybe that is something that goes on, zoning or something, as far as monthly fee to follow up, but I think that's also something that we have to talk to the attorney on, what kind of enforcement we can take on it, and what kind of recourse we have.
Right, and I think also that, if we give the STR owner a list of what our rules are, they're gonna have to pass them on to their guests. You know, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, attorney, whatever his name is. Sean, but I don't see why a city could not go ahead and say, hey, look, this is, you know, these are our policies and they have to be followed. And in order for that to happen, the property owner has got to enforce them. Can we do that?
Well, yes, the liability for non-compliance with the ordinance falls on the property owner. So in terms of how we're regulating this with the zoning code and other use regulations, are gonna fall on the owner rather than the occupants. When we move outside of the zoning code and the use requirements, then we get a little bit more into a tenuous place where we're gonna have, we'd actually delve deeper into this, but I'd imagine there's gonna be issues if we're trying to attach, per se, nuisance liability to property owners when the property owners are not responsible for that nuisance activity. But we have to delve a little bit farther into this. But in terms of use requirements and zoning code requirements, then yes, that would attach to the property owner and could easily be regulated in that manner.
Okay, and a fine could be involved?
Yes, non-compliance with the zoning ordinance can be subject to a forfeiture.
Sounds good to me.
And I assume, Sean, under certain circumstances, revocation of the STR license and the ability to operate as such, again, appropriately structured, that could be a consequence as well.
They need to vet their clients. I mean, you know, if they want to stay operating.
Yeah, but the question is.
That's certainly something that could be enacted. In terms of the current licensure requirements, I don't believe that we have a mechanism in place for revoking short-term licenses. We would have to discuss, there's the renewal, the non-renewal would definitely be an option, but in terms of a process for, I don't believe we have a method right now that would involve revocation.
Actually, it's a little strangely placed under the heading of appeals, but it looks like 613.6B. A license may be revoked by city council for one or more of the following. And I apologize because I'm not real conversant in this one either, but 613.6B.
Yeah, under appeals, yeah, we do have the opportunity to for revocation.
I guess I'm a little confused. I'd like to finish an issue. We were talking about there are more STRs rentals than what we were seeing, 40 and you're 100 or 70 some. Question was, how many are there? And the question we were talking about is, how do we determine how many there are? Is it 40 or is it 72? And, you know, whether we revoke all the other stuff is not.
I apologize. Yeah, I mean, the council certainly could first provide some direction to staff to get you
how many there are accurately.
a better answer as to the discrepancy between those.
And then we can enforce compliance if we know people who aren't paying, or we can mandate what we have written in the books. We can collect more room tax, perhaps control the situation better because they're invisible. We don't know.
But Andre, you're gonna share the platform you were looking at, right, with us?
Yeah, I can share with you, it requires a monthly fee, so you only see a platform. I could potentially work with Mr. Taylor if he would like to see what I'm looking at and help advise the city on what to do. If that was something.
This is City Attorney Sean Griffin again. So a part of the discrepancy might be in that the ordinance as written and as only allowed by statute for properties that are doing less than 10 nights of short-term rentals a year do not have to abide by the licensure requirement. And statute limits municipalities on enforcing requirements in terms of licensure on properties that are doing 9 or less days a year. So it's possible that at a given time, there could be more properties than we would otherwise anticipate, but then it becomes an issue there of trying to figure out at what point a property has more than 10 days.
And that's, I think, a case where that provision is quite appropriate. Just think about the NFL draft upcoming and trying to stay on top of people using that opportunity to make a buck.
Absolutely. The 10 days comes from the state act, that is a requirement of the state act. The revoke after 2, unlike most places that you see, ours is not 2 calls, ours is 2 convictions, which is a very high bar to cross. Police calls is more typical. Do 2, some Door County wants to do 3, and then there's the potential to revoke. We have the revoke language, but only upon 2 convictions, which is, as I said, you're going to court. It's higher law, the way it's written.
Well,
And I think the answer to your question, most Door County and quite a few other places we do not, a good neighbor requirement where there's a city created, or for Door County, the whole county creates a good neighbor packet. And you have to include both the packet and your property boundaries, things like when to take trash out, et cetera. And that has to be by ordinance given to every tenant. We don't have that.
Yeah,
Licensing, it's been a long time since I looked at this, but I think the state puts it in the first power into the county health department, right? Health department in general. So this seems more of a county issue as to see how many are out there or not, and they should be better adequate to enforce this than anyone should be, in my opinion.
yeah, that's a good point.
Scott?
Yo, sorry, go ahead.
The other reason, I mean, finding the under the radar units is, I mean, one aspect is room tax, but the other aspect is they have to pass inspections before they get their license, so.
Yeah, it's not just for us to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is that something we can go back to the county and say,
They may not be telling the county they want to stay under the radar, and they haven't, or to the county, they want to do this.
right, but shouldn't the county then, like Adam said, shouldn't the county then go after those illegal rentals?
The state act bestows it to the municipality specifically. Now, they have to have a Wisconsin DATCAP, they have to have Wisconsin DATCAP license, basically a retailer license in the state. That goes down to the county level, the county then has to have theirs, and then the municipality, if you look at the act, it actually is to the city, the municipality.
Is that though because we've delegated our health department function back up to the county? I mean, the county is the recognized agency for DATCAP.
Yeah, we don't have health department. We give that to the county because the county has a health department.
It's
But
fun.
they're supposed to, I thought I saw a form on Two Rivers saying that, don't you charge like a fee to these short-term rentals?
Yep. Yeah,
Like
and
a
the council
permit, they have
passed,
to have a permit. And in order to have the permit, they have to have an inspection by the county health department.
correct.
I mean, that's what I read.
Correct. But yeah, but we're talking about those that aren't applying for it or
Well,
going
what,
around it.
yeah, because they wanna go under the radar,
Right,
they don't wanna
exactly.
pay the fee. I mean, that's not, they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Right.
County should be going after them for it.
But how do
The
they
state
find out?
delegates that authority to them. We enacted it for our own city, why? Because they're the health department, they gotta do the inspections.
I know, but I don't know how the county, I doubt if they're looking,
I doubt it. They should. You know.
because the only way you can find out is if somebody turns you in, some neighbor. Something's going on next door. Next door, something's going on.
Right next door to me.
Well, I mean, wouldn't it behoove us to try and get a handle on it? And to take a couple extra steps, get a baseline as to how many we actually have? And let the county health department know And then, once we have that taken care of, it'll be a lot easier to monitor. But I think that if we find out what's going on in our city and then let the health department know, and then they'll know they're gonna have to do some inspections. So I think it's worth taking a little bit more time and effort to find out.
And then at least alert
Yeah.
the county health
And
department.
let
to
the-
say,
yeah.
But let them go after.
Right, yeah, but we gotta figure out who's out there.
Well, if it helps, I mean, I can state for the record, and Lisa can put it down, that I will see that we assign staff, and probably be Adam Taylor, to work with Mr. Robitaille, who's volunteered to take a look at the source that he has cited and prepare to report back to council on the apparent discrepancy between what's out there from that online source and the numbers we see from our own records of the county. That's good information on
Yes.
which the
Well, and I
council
think-
proceeds. On the other hand, for vacation rentals as a whole, how many complaints do you get? I mean, really, seriously, no disrespect intended, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad situation, but do you hear from very many people whose
I think
neighborhoods are
Right,
adversely
or
impacted?
the same one.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's people complaining that the city is just letting all these rentals come into the city and chasing everyone away.
Mhm.
And it's a horrible problem, there's 95% of rentals. And that's not the case, it's 1% of the houses that we know of, say 40 are vacation rentals. So it's not as bad as
But if
it
it's,
is.
but if it's understated by half in terms of license, that's a legitimate concern.
Exactly.
That's a data point.
Yeah.
That needs to be addressed.
Another common complaint too is that it inflates the prices of our housing in this market. Well, nationally, housing are inflated all over. And I don't think that's necessarily the reason our prices are going up. I think our prices have been understated for many years.
Well, and if you take away potential rental units for residents, if they can't find a place, it's, supply and demand.
Yeah. Mhm.
And, but I know that, it was just a month or two ago, I had a conversation with Chief Minor, and he actually sent me some data as to, did you get that? I know it was a couple of people. I don't know, is that something you want to talk to, or,
I think it's just talking to exactly Greg's point, is there was next to no complaints on
right?
the ones that we know.
Yeah, because I read the list that you provided, and it was like, it's not there.
Correct.
So what I'm thinking is, should we just go forward with what Greg recommended? Find out how many we really have, how many potentially are out there that under the radar, and then get reported back to that, and then we just go from there.
I'm hearing that's a consensus.
Yeah.
This was kind of a very broad heading. Are there any other issues that are having neighborhood impacts that you seriously want staff or a board or committee to take a look at? We've talked about parking impacts. I'll leave it to Bonnie to carry that one forward.
I don't know what to do about that, but I wish that we would come up with things, this is not just Airbnbs.
Right.
I mean, there's this one house, in my neighborhood that has enough room for one car in the driveway and a one car garage. And I see 4 cars parked around that house because they're renting it to people, and they must have, I don't know how many apartments, I don't know anything about it, but the point is, you're gonna buy something and rent it out, shouldn't we at least have some requirement that maybe you should have X amount of spaces for your cars? I mean, why are you gonna buy a home for rental and you only have enough room for 2 cars? And yet you wanna have 2 apartments in that place. If you're following what I mean, and I don't know. And parking is a problem everywhere, because my neighbor across the street, the 3 houses have no room to park in the street, ever. I mean, ever, weekends, holidays, or any of that.
Mhm.
But, and that's not, I get it that things are getting more modern, it's not that so much, but isn't there like something that we could we at least start discussing it? I don't know what other places do about parking, but it's because we're an older, well, all cities in the United States are older, and people didn't have cars like they did. I mean, I don't know what you're gonna do, but at least I would like to see it talked about.
And I think, not to put any words in our city attorney's mouth, but like Sean said, it'd be one thing if someone was converting a single family home to a two flat. But I think what we've got are, older housing stock. If it already was a 2 or 3 unit rental in the days when Model Ts had just come into vogue, it's still grandfathered as a 2 or 3 bedroom, and society changed. And I don't know what you do there. As far as mandating that the owner provide off-street parking.
Some of these places, other cities are mandating that kind of thing. Because it's becoming, depending on where you are, it's becoming a problem. I mean, my cousin lives in Algoma. There's only 3,000 people there, and I mean, how many houses can you lose to Airbnbs? Where are your people supposed to go? You're residents of that city. If you're a family that wants to find a home and they're being bought up by outsiders for various reasons. I mean, I'm just saying, these are problems that are happening.
Well, there's a big issue with corporate ownership of
Yes.
individual
And that is
rental
hard.
properties, period.
Yeah,
Not maybe as short-term rentals, but maybe you see it all over town. And that's troubling as well. The other thing though, honestly, with parking, you have people with garages that are full of crap,
I know.
and they park on the street, and it becomes someone else's problem because they're not addressing it. So I'm not sure that it's entirely a structural problem. It's also a human behavior problem, how people choose to live. Sorry, but that has.
So is that something we should talk about maybe at the next work session meeting?
Pardon me?
Should we talk about parking at the next work session meeting perhaps? Or do you want to start talking about it sooner, or?
I don't know, I'm just saying that I just am saying it wouldn't hurt to start thinking about that, or is there something different that could be done?
Okay.
I mean, even when they did, I was talking to one of my neighbors, and they did 14th Street, they did it on the other side, and they moved, there's some telephone poles 1 inch away from the approach of their driveway, and I'm thinking, why would you do that? You just made this brand new street, that telephone pole isn't going anywhere for the next 50 to 75 years. And I just, then they moved a fire hydrant, he's not here, the water guy's not here, but right in the middle, instead of on the corner, they put it in the middle, so now she has no parking in front of her house. Because you can't park in front of the fire hydrant.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know the reasons for those
there's like
individual
illogical things
decisions.
that happen.
Chief?
I just wanted to mention that it's not that we haven't talked about parking before, because I specifically remember, Adam, I think as president at the time, bringing up an example of, what about the family that has 3 kids, they're all driving age, and all of a sudden, so now you could have 5 vehicles just within a family of 5, you're going to have other issues, and so all I do is bring that up as an example of, one, we've talked about it, we've talked about it a bunch of times, just since I've been assistant chief and chief. So where you go with that, I don't know, but there are examples of where it's legitimate too, and I don't know what you do with that. Right.
And you got old neighborhoods, they may have a 1-car garage. You might have 3 kids, you might have 2 in high school or 2 in college, 1 in high school, and mom and dad. And they all gotta have jobs and
Or,
It's not that easy. I've seen families like that.
Yep, we're not,
Some with 2-car garages, it's still, it's tough.
we're not a transit community where very many people can rely on the skeletal transit we have for every day commute. It doesn't work that way.
all right.
Okay, have we, at this point,
I think so,
exhausted that
I think
topic?
we're good, right?
Yes.
Good.
Okay. So, on to action items. By the way, thank you, very good discussion. Thank you, guys, for coming.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
for having us.
Yep, thanks for coming in, appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You guys could have done ATVs for parking.
Hey.
Is your feet?
There's a sore project.
Yeah, keep moving.
ATVs.
Sure, drop a
Okay.
bomb on your way out the door.
Before that becomes anything.
Yep.
On to 5 action items.
Yes,
Consideration amendment to 2024 capital budgets to provide funding for replacement of City Hall elevator controls.
and actually this project, it would be better termed an elevator refurbishment project because it would involve not only controls, which have given us some real scares in the last year because they failed, and happily the folks from Schindler Elevator have been able to get them working again because replacement parts for 32-year-old elevator are not readily available. It would also involve replacement of the pump and the pump motor and a number of components, the traveling cable that goes up and down with the car. This could just as easily be a 2025 capital budget item. The thing is, we don't know from that elevator's gonna fail one day. And here we sit on the 3rd floor with handicap accessibility being possible to this public meeting, not to mention the public's use of the building and staff's use, only because of that elevator. And it also just jumps just a little bit, if you've noticed that little start between floors now. We have a proposal from Schindler that's about 119,000 and change. The reason 125 appears in this is in case there are any items beyond the scope that maybe are city items that need to be addressed. I'm just, in all honesty, I'm real uneasy about the status of that elevator and don't want to be dealing with it, nor do I expect you, should it fail us and need to be out for the long term. Proposing to use existing borrowed capital funds that were provided for TID number 12, it's Fund 241. Why is that exceeding what we think we'll be spending? Well, since budget and since the time we did borrowing, the scope of the project for the Washington Street Bridge has changed. It's not a sidewalk extension with parapet wall, it's a sidewalk extension. And we don't know the final cost, but this amendment would still, excuse me, would still allow 330,000 for that. The 355 figure you see there for capital outlay construction would include the 25,000 budgeted for architectural work for converting the high lift building to a visitor center. And then the balance would be, 330,000 for the bridge sidewalk and the addition of 1 or 2 intersections worth of pedestrian activated flashing beacons, which we also built into this year's budget. So I think that's a fairly legitimate figure as far as the reduction we can anticipate and proposing that it be reallocated. So we could give the go ahead. And I know Kevin, our maintenance director for City Hall, did get a proposal from a second contractor, but they said their proposal would replace a lot more parts. They would not reuse as much of the Schindler branded equipment as Schindler does. So that's who manufactured the elevator. It's not an Otis, it's a Schindler. So that's the request. It could wait. We could be lucky. We could not be lucky. And odds are a 33-year-old elevator is not going to go 35 years without being refurbished. I just have a gut feeling. Sorry, I don't have anything more analytical than that. Something's going to happen.
Craig, do you have any estimate of the amount of time it would be shut down?
My understanding, it would be relatively brief because they wouldn't be doing it until parts are in. It still could be a couple of weeks.
Now, and the duration, once they start it, will it be a couple days, a couple weeks?
My dust is, it could be a couple of weeks.
Couple weeks.
If this goes forward, when would they be able to start the work?
I need to confirm that, quite honestly.
Cause I'm afraid it would be way the heck out there,
Yeah.
you know?
It's sooner than it would be if we wait longer. That's all.
Sounds like Yogi Berra. It's always the last place to go.
So looking for a motion to adopt the resolution? Anyone?
I'll make that.
Thank you, Darrell, second by.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Doug. Any council discussion? We'll pass marks. See nothing, roll call vote, Lisa.
Bill Leclerc, Doug Brandt,
Aye.
Tim Petrie,
Aye.
Bonnie Shimelowitz, Scott Steckmeister,
Aye.
Adam Huskey,
Aye.
Darla Leclerc, Mark Bittner,
Aye.
Shannon Derby. Aye. All in favor.
Thank you for that. On to 6, still having closed executive session?
Yes, please.
City council reserves the right to enter into closed session per Wisconsin statutes 19.85 1E, deliberating and negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investment of public funds, or conducting other specified public business when other competitive or bargaining reason require a closed session. Tonight, we're discussing possible property acquisition, discuss matters related to a property sale, and discuss possible assistance to economic development project.
Sorry.
Looking for a motion to go into closed session.
Sorry.
Thank you, Adam, second by Tim. Roll call vote, Lisa.
Douglas Brandt,
Aye.
Tim Petrie,
Aye.
Bonnie Shimelowitz, Scott Steckmeister,
Aye.
Adam Huskey,
Aye.
Darla Leclerc, Mark Bittner,
Aye.
Shannon Derby, Bill Leclerc.
Aye.
All in favor.
Mr. President, maybe a 5-minute break?
Sure, 5 minutes.
So people can take care of necessities